Greetings guys, and thanks for joining me today. I am Chrysalis and this is Woman on Wrestling. I have decided to shorten up the title of my channel a little bit just to make it easier for me to be found as well as to help out with readability. So I do hope that you enjoy the change. And again, thank you for spending some time with me today. This upcoming weekend we have Money in the Bank 2020, and it's been kind of and I'm not sure what the word is for it, but I didn't do a pops and blown spots for last week's Raw and SmackDown because honestly, I didn't feel the need to do so. There wasn't a ton that stood out for me, but there also wasn't a ton that stood out for me in the negative side of things to make me go, wow, that sucked. So it was just kind of there. And it's been a really interesting experience, I think, for everyone when it comes to live entertainment in general with this pandemic. Live entertainment overall is going to be widely affected for at least the next 12 to 18 months that I can figure based on my own experience within the industry. And it's just going to be a difficult time. So I think that's certainly being shown when it comes to things like pro wrestling. Viewership for Raw this past week, the Monday before Money in the Bank, the Monday before a pay-per-view, was only a 1.68 share overall, which is considerably down from where it normally is. And I think just not having a live audience is a huge factor in that. I think that once we get live audiences back in, whether that's at the Performance Center or anywhere else, larger venues and whatnot, we're going to start getting that feel back again. The performers are going to start getting back into the groove again, as it were, and it's just going to be an overall much better experience. I would anticipate that coming back to a fully open stadium or a fully opened arena, if they're able to do so, is going to have a considerable benefit to both the WWE as well as pro wrestling as a whole. Even the smaller federations are going to get a huge boost once they can start bringing audiences back in. And I think we're starting to see the effects of that now. So ultimately, I think there's going to be things that both WWE, AEW, and any other wrestling federation globally are going to have to do in order to start returning to a regular sense of normalcy and sort of returning back to where they were. But I can get into that on another video, and I may very well do so coming up. What I've decided to do today, at least, is I've noticed online it's been quite a long time since anyone has done a pro wrestling terms and or wrestling terminology primer, as it were, and I thought it would be a good idea to go ahead and do that. I know when I first started watching wrestling when I was a kid, I didn't know any of the industry terms. You don't really pay much attention to that when you're a little one watching pro wrestling, but as I grew up and as I got more involved with both the wrestling as a subculture, if you can even call it a subculture, but the WWE universe, or what would eventually become the WWE universe, as well as just actively participating in stage combat myself, there are a lot of terms from WWE and from professional wrestling that have carried over into stage combat. And they're good terms to know anyway. And just like any other subculture that gains any sort of pop culture popularity, those terms kind of start blending over into normal everyday speak. So I thought it would be a good idea to do a kind of primer as to what the wrestling terms were and what they've meant. There is a considerable number of terms that are out there and that are used quite regularly. So I'm not sure right now if this is going to be a single video or a two-part video. I suspect it's going to be a two-part video, and if so, they will be tagged accordingly. But I hope you'll bear with me. I'm going to go through these as much as I can and sort of explain them, not just from a definition standpoint, but from an actual standpoint of usage, from the terms that at least I regularly used when I was in stage combat myself. Because again, there is a lot of carryover. Now, I tried to break these up based on how they are used and when they are used. So the first portion of this I'm going to go over are sort of the basic terms. These are the terms you're going to hear the most whenever you're on any of the dirt sheets, whenever you're online, whenever you're on Twitter, whenever you're on social media. The first word, since I'm going to start with the letter A anyway, is the word angle. Now, an angle in professional wrestling is the storyline. It's the point that they're trying to get across at any point in time. So that's a very important thing to know. If you're talking about an angle, you're talking about the overlying storyline or the story arc for those particular characters. Now, for characters themselves, you have baby faces or faces and heels. Your faces, or your baby faces, are your good guys. Those are the guys that are always going to act heroically. They're always going to do the right thing. They're always going to promote positivity. They're always going to just be your quintessential good guy. Your heel, on the other hand, is your quintessential bad guy. Complete polar opposite from a face. In order for there to be a invested storyline or an invested angle, you have to have a heel and a face. Or more than one, or even more than 2 or 3, depending on the situation, especially if you're talking about a tag team. But you have to have a heel and you have to have a face. I personally tend to gravitate more towards heels. I gravitated more towards playing heels, and I think I was significantly better at playing a heel than playing a face. Some people are better at playing one than another. Naomi is a perfect example of that. I know it was something she had talked about on Total Divas, where they had her do a heel turn, and I'll get to a turn in just a little bit, but they had her do a heel turn and she felt really uncomfortable doing it because she had always been a face and that's what she was comfortable playing, and she's very, very good at it. That's why, generally speaking, now when you see Naomi, 99% of the time she's going to be a face, she's not going to be a heel. And that's just, some people gravitate toward playing certain characters much easier. Certain things come easier. Certain things resonate with an audience much easier. And that also leads me into the word turn, like I just mentioned. A turn is when a character switches between a heel and a face. You're going to have heel turns, you're going to have face turns. Those are going to happen pretty often for the most part with most characters throughout the course of their careers, regardless of what federations they are in. Like I said, some people are better at playing one type of character than the other. Some people can go back and forth and not have any problem whatsoever. The Rock was a primary example of somebody that could play a face, that could play a heel, and either way, the man got a pop and he was over with the crowd. And I'll get to those terms as well shortly. Some other terms that you're going to hear frequently is whether something is a work or a shoot. So a work is something that is scripted. That is something that was predetermined, that was something that creative came up with, that is the angle that the characters are following. Something that's a shoot is something that was unscripted. It's something that is real life. It is actually happening. It is the character breaking their gimmick or breaking their angle even, and that happens from time to time. You'll hear that term used quite regularly outside of the WWE when someone's gotten fired and they turn around and they do an interview and they do a shoot on the WWE and basically break down the mysticism or the secrecy of what goes on behind the scenes. It's when they break the fourth wall almost. So a work is something that's scripted, a shoot is something that is unscripted. Now a gimmick is a character's persona. A perfect example of this would be John Cena and all of the various gimmicks he's done throughout the years. Bray Wyatt and The Fiend right now is a very large example of a gimmick. Currently you obviously have Bray, who's playing this character that when he is Bray, he's this, you know, very innocent, almost childhood, you know, Mr. Rogers type character, but then he turns into the Fiend and that's his darker side coming out, and Bray is trying to keep the Fiend in check, but at the same time he needs the Fiend. That's all a gimmick. That's all a storyline driven character development in some way, shape, or form. Now, to get into a bit more words you may not hear as often, but that you'll still hear, you have a stable. Now, a stable is basically a group of wrestlers. Right now, Zelina has a stable. Andrade, Austin Theory, and Angel Garza are part of Zelina's stable. Now, some stables get names. You have stables like The Authority. You have stables like Evolution. You have stables like the, there's been a ton of them throughout the years. The Brood was another stable when you had Gangrel and Christian and Edge with their vampire gimmick. That was a stable. So a stable is basically a group of wrestlers. Generally speaking, they're all going to have the same wants and desires. They're usually going to be heels. It's very rare to have stables of good guys, but it does happen. Basically, New Day is technically a stable. It's 3 guys who all function as a tag team, and they're interchangeable, but ultimately, at the end of the day, they're a stable. The card is who's performing that night. Now, you're going to have a card whether you have a house show or a live show. Again, terms I'll get to in just a little bit, but the card is basically who you are expected to see performing that night, the matches that you're expected to see. Now, the card is always subject to change. At least within a live event, that's the case. When I did when I was doing Stage Combat, the card was set every single day, day in and day out, because it was a completely scripted show. But when you are doing a live event, the card is always subject to change, and it's basically who you can anticipate seeing that evening or during that particular event. A dark match is a match that is not televised. You might have dark matches take place before Raw or SmackDown that are never televised. You never see them. Somebody might allude to them later on in the show. They may show snippets of them later on in the show if it goes along with an angle that needs to be furthered during the live event or during the televised event. But a dark match is basically a single match that is not televised to the viewing audience. A house show is a whole show that is not televised to an audience. Generally speaking, at least in the WWE, you have your live shows on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays, depending on which brand you are in, and then you have house shows on Saturdays and Sundays. And those are basically, you could kind of think of them as filler shows. They are ways for the WWEU to be able to be a part of the WWE on a larger scale. They are usually not as expensive as a live event because it is not televised. It gives the wrestlers and the performers a way to try out new things, try out new finishers, feel out some things as to what the audience is going to respond to so that they can incorporate it in the live shows and further their brand. So house shows are very important for a good number of reasons. And I'm going to try to move through these pretty quick. So I apologize if I'm going a little too fast. If you need me to clarify anything, of course, make sure you leave a comment down below and I will be most happy to do so. So since this is getting rather long, I actually am going to chop this up into 2 different videos for you. So this will be part 1, the end of part 1. Part 2 will be linked up in here somewhere for you to see. I will try to get those up at the same time, but at least you'll have them both readily available. I do hope you'll join me for that video. And if you've enjoyed what you've learned so far today, by all means, please hit the subscribe button and the notification bell so you can be notified when new content is uploaded. I do try to do it at least once a week at this particular point in time. I may do it more frequently or less frequently as work schedule will allow, but as well, if you could also hit a like, because that helps me promote this channel and it is something that I would like to grow. So again, I would greatly appreciate it if you could take a moment to do that. And again, guys, enjoy. I will see you on the next video if you would like to see part 2. Otherwise, have a great time and I'll see you on the next one.